I can tell you how healthy your business is by knowing if your active account base is growing or shrinking. But within this industry, there's a tremendous customer churn. So there's this big issue around active account deficits where the account bases are actually shrinking and they stop buying. You can't just decide overnight, I'm going to go sell to designers and have any large degree of success. The policies they want are different. On the retail side too, the sales cycle is very short, where on the design side, they're going to spec it. Then it's a very much longer sales process involved.
Randy, the other thing that is changing in the market is trade shows are kind of changing themselves.
Trade shows are still vital to our industry. That's not going to change. But I think we have to look at is that most people experience our products in this industry, they experience it digitally. AI is really bringing forth even better assets, so people now can look online and feel more comfortable buying something.
What's the one thing about this industry that hasn't changed in 20 years and should?
The sales reps.
Today our guest is Randy Egan. Randy is a different kind of guest because he's not running a single brand, but he's the guy you call when something is going off with your brand and you need to figure out what you're going to do next. Randy has over 3 decades of experience in the home and gift industry. He has spent years on the operator side, has held senior positions at companies like A&B Home, Larsen Jewel and Evergreen Enterprises.
For the past 10 years, Randy has actually been running his own consulting business,
where he works with emerging and mid-sized wholesale companies to actually help them rethink their sales strategy, rethink their brand and help them grow profitably. So Randy, let's start with a quick introduction of you. Tell us about your career journey and how did you make your way to home decor and wholesale in general.
Okay. Yeah. So I have been in this industry my entire career and kind of stumbled into it right out of college. My wife actually got a job with a company selling gift products, and I'd never heard of this industry, never dreamt of being in it. And she would come home and start talking to me about what they did and the shows and all the ins and outs. And so I became intrigued by it, and so I went and interviewed. Ended up ultimately getting hired and really kind of fell in love with it at that point. This industry has a real cadence to it as far as the trade shows and the new product releases. And I was telling somebody just earlier today, I love it because it's not dry and boring like industrial equipment, or you don't need a lot of technical knowledge like you do in medical supplies or things like that, right? You're kind of dealing with love and emotion, and a lot of your customers are happy and all of that. So I got into this industry as a salesperson and then moved my way up the ranks into sales management and then to operations and running companies and all of that. And I've done a lot of different things I think are really interesting, and it keeps me interested all the time, which I'm still passionate about what I do. And then over the last number of years, I started a consulting business probably 10 years ago or more at this point. And realized a lot of the brands in our industry have the same challenges. So as opposed to being an executive at one brand, I decided to work with multiple brands and apply those same principles, if you will. And that's been fascinating, challenging, frustrating, all those things.
And Randy, when these brands come to you, what are they typically coming to you for? What kind of problem statements are they bringing to you?
So over the last few years, it's interesting. We've really I've gotten into doing a lot of strategic reengineering, I call it, where they come and they've gotten out of alignment in some form or fashion. It might be out of sales alignment, or the market's evolved and they haven't actually evolved with the market. And so we usually get involved with working on sales, marketing, sometimes operational, implementing technology. There's a lot of different aspects to it, but I usually say it's an alignment issue that they have. And almost always on a sales perspective, they need a better sales strategy. They need to really expand their active account base. That's almost always a big piece of what the issue is. And so we work with them on that.
Got it. So Randy, just maybe for the audience, it'll be helpful if you can talk about how do you start your diagnosing process, right? So if I come to you with a problem and my problem is that, hey, my sales are not growing, how do you diagnose what's the real problem underneath?
So always, it's a lot of reports. So I asked for a ton of information about, really getting into the details or into the weeds, if you will, as to looking at the history, looking at what's going on with their account base, what's going on with their product line, all of those things. And that pretty much after so many years, you kind of it's like almost forensic accounting. You kind of know what you're looking for, and then you just kind of validate it within the data. But within this industry, there's a tremendous customer churn where customers buy and then they stop buying, and so there's this big issue around active account deficits where the account bases are actually shrinking and they stop buying, and there's a lot of issues around that. And so really analyzing that and then understanding why that's occurring and then coming up with a plan to go after those accounts is usually one of the first components of it. We also then look at the selling tools, look at operationally, how fast are they shipping, return rates, damage rates, all those things. Basically, I have a saying that I tell everybody is we want to be known as the easiest company to buy from and the easiest company to sell for. And if we're failing in one of those two areas, then that's usually where we need to start focusing. And then any new initiative we want to come out with, that's kind of the filter we want to look through it. Is if it's easy for the retailer or designer, easy for the salesperson, it's usually going to win.
Got it. What are the most common reasons you found for sort of high churn rate of accounts?
Of accounts?
Yeah.
It's interesting. You would think, there's this smoking gun as to what's wrong and why they stop buying, but usually it's not a significant reason. Sometimes it's lack of service. Sometimes there was an issue that happened, with a salesperson or the company itself, and, you need to kind of go in and resolve that. Sometimes Oftentimes, honestly, though, it's, again, an alignment issue where the customer base started thinking that the product line was stale and that the products really weren't evolving at the rate they should with the market. And so then the retailer or designer goes off and finds new resources for it. And so part of that, re-engineering is really understanding, is the marketing messaging strong, and do they understand what we're actually doing now? And usually the answer is no. Is that they don't understand where the company's going or what the company's trying to achieve. And so it's really getting that marketing messaging out so that the customers start, coming back again to the brand.
Got it. Can you give some specific examples of this marketing messaging where you actually saw just fixing the marketing message led to accounts getting reactivated? And maybe you can sort of share some kind of a case study with the audience where that kind of worked for you.
Sure. So I guess a good example would be there's a very large company within the industry that was really known for a single product category. And then over the years, they really expanded into almost being a full home supplier, if you will. So they moved from being a single category to, almost full home. But their customer base, older customer base, really thought of them still as that single category supplier. And so it was really starting to focus on, do they understand, that we're in all of these different product categories? We create materials around brand profiles so that it's something the salesperson can distribute that kind of speaks to the core capabilities of the brand. We create marketing messages, kind of really getting that out. We look at brand pillars, and make sure that internally that brand understands, why they're better, how they're better, and where they want to go. So it's kind of a comprehensive answer, I guess, if you will, that you have to kind of look at all aspects and then try to start getting that messaging out to the customers.
And Randy, if I'm a brand and I've been doing this for many years and I've launched all of these new categories, my reps are already going into these accounts and I'm assuming they're showing these products. At trade shows, I'm displaying so many categories. If I'm doing all of these things, why is that messaging not getting out to the customers? What's the core fundamental misalignment which leads to my customer base still thinking about me as a one category supplier?
The word that jumps to mind is adoption, is that, the sales team oftentimes, has built up their customer base around selling specific categories. And so even though they have these other product categories to go in with, they're comfortable and they've got the relationship with the buyer that's buying those type of things, especially within the furniture home side of our business, right? The buyer buying case goods is going to be different than the buyer that buys lighting in many instances. And so it's really that they haven't developed that fully on that side. And then again, I just go back to, is the brand, they're coming out with new product categories, but is it the right product categories for the market? And interestingly, right now, we're focusing on really treating our brands that we work with that are full home we want to sell everything, but we're almost now starting to look at individual business units, if you will, that, hey, we need to get placement and traction on furniture, on lighting, on wall, whatever it might be.
That's interesting because one would think that if I have this customer base and if I keep adding more categories, I would organically keep increasing my penetration into those accounts. But what you're saying is it's not that organic. Like you have to put like specific effort and push those categories into your customer base.
Yeah. Yes.
Got it. Got it. So Randy, talk about like say I'm a brand and you're working with a brand, you're helping them relaunch essentially, getting their marketing messaging right. What are the core, like, how does one do that? So if somebody wants to sort of re-engineer their brand, they want to get a different messaging out, they want to tell their customer base that they are changing these things. What do they need to do? How do they need to execute this? Just paint a picture of like what goes into the execution of this.
Well, again, there's different layers to it. Sometimes they want to do a complete revamp of what they've done. You know, I've worked with some brands that really literally wanted to change their name, change everything. And then you'll have other brands that they are so well established, they have so much legacy behind them that they're really looking just to adjust and to fine tune, if you will. So it really depends. But if they're looking to really make a full scale change, you know, it starts with getting down to what's the right messaging again, and what is our where's the gap in the market, I call it. Like, you know, who is our competitors? What do we think our strengths are going to be? You know, why are we changing and wanting to go after that? Is it we think we're going to win on price? We're going to win on design? Is it that we have some type of technological advantage that we think we're going to use? There's a lot of sameness in our industry. I'm sure you've noticed. You walk around and everybody kind of looks somewhat similar, right? And so you have to figure out why are we going to win, and then really craft the product, the message, and everything, you know, kind of around that. On some of the legacy brands, it's not as easy as that, you know, because they're known for something. They don't want to lose that business. They don't want to lose those customers. So you really want to keep that, but then try to, you know, push into the other channels that maybe they're missing or other product categories.
I think the sameness is a good point because I feel like the products get copied very quickly. So any inherent advantage of like making a new design, somebody will copy it in 1 or 2 cycles, essentially. So as a brand, like, how do I build that competitive advantage, or what are the other competitive advantages that I could build essentially to set myself apart from competition?
The biggest in our industry is creating proprietary designs. And that's honestly what I try to focus on is, you know, are you a brand that's creating your own work, or can you create your own designs? Because if you're just buying factory goods, market goods, factory selects, whatever you want to say, then we're going to compete on price, and it's a race to the bottom, you know, which is not easy and not something that's really what I want to be involved in. So create proprietary designs, really be known for service is the other side of it. You know, again, your active account based growth is kind of the one of the holy grails of our industry, right? I can tell you how healthy your business is by knowing if your active account base is growing or shrinking. So, you know, if you're losing customers because you don't have good service, your products aren't up to speed or poor quality, you know, those are things that are always going to, you know, limit your growth.
Got it. I think, Randy, another shift that we're seeing in the industry is a lot of brands that were previously retail focused. Everybody thinks that retail is kind of slowing down. A lot of people are now trying to refocus on the designer segment. Is that also a reason why a lot of these brands are looking to sort of change their messaging? Is it to focus on a new channel entirely?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you're a legacy brand and you've done a lot of retail business over the years, you know, again, you might say, well, that the market's really contracting. I don't share that viewpoint, by the way. I think it's a market share game. You know, is that, you know, it's growing your active account base again is the name of the game. But, you know, getting into the design channel is a big piece of it. Sometimes it might be hospitality. Or in the gift side of the equation, you know, they get into all kinds of different channels there that are a bit different than what we do on the home side as well. So, but it's very different. Like design versus retail, you can't just decide overnight I'm going to go sell to designers and have any large degree of success, because the policies they want are different, their needs are different, what they expect out of product quality and delivery and all of that is different. The order size is different. Like everything about it is different, and it takes more than just saying we want to sell to the design channel to be able to actually go and do it.
Can you talk specifically about uh, maybe the sales side of it, right? So if I say I get the product right, I maybe re-engineer my collection to cater more to the designer segment. Um, on the sales strategy side, like how do designers want to be serviced versus how retail wants to be serviced? Is there a core difference in how the two segments want to buy?
Yes, yeah. So on the retail side, what we always focus on more is like turns and margins, right? Is that the retailer's got a high overhead, they need high profit items, and so trying to find products that are really going to turn for them at a high profit margin is the key. Whereas on the design side, it really is more about the design, right? Is that they are less concerned about price and more concerned about that it adds value to their customers, right? Is that it's unique, it's different. They're going to not have any service-related issues by placing that with their customers and things like that. On the retail side, too, the sales cycle is very short. They'll walk into the showroom here, or the salesperson will go see them on the road, and they'll write an order, and everybody's great. Where on the design side, they're going to spec it. Right, they're going to take that piece of furniture and spec it out and send it out to their potential customers, and it's a very much longer sales process involved. And there's usually a lot more coordination, honestly, with it too, because if they're doing a room or a full home or something like that, they have multiple vendors involved, multiple timelines, all of that. So again, the level of service that they're looking for is often much more intense, and a retail salesperson often will struggle with that. Right, as they're used to walking in and getting a $5,000 order or whatever, and a designer is going to be more labor intensive, take longer, but there's way more of them, right? There's 50,000 designers, I think, in the United States that are registered. So, it's a numbers game. Can you get to the right designers?
Got it. So if you are working with a brand and they want to grow the designer side of their business, um, how would you tell them to re-engineer their sales team? So is the right way to do this that, hey, I'll have a different sales team going after my retail accounts and a different sales team entirely to service designer? Or how should one think about sort of their sales process when it comes to servicing these two channels?
So it's a definite maybe, right? Is it meaning that it always changes, it's always varies. So in some instances, it makes sense to try to implement an entirely new team to go after the design side. But it's also complicated because many designers now, to be competitive, their showrooms are now basically turning into retail storefronts. And so while the vast majority of their business is design, they now have a storefront. And so then, well, is it considered retail or is it considered design? And so you get into those battles over, really what it is. So for the most part, the ideal situation would be having a sales team that could service both sides of the equation. And for the independent rep, that's honestly what they want too, because travel expenses are high. If they're going out somewhere, they want to be able to service as many customers as they possibly can. So the ideal situation is where they could service both retail and design at the same time.
How do I, as a brand, ascertain that if my sales team is up to that challenge? Or I've had these reps for a long period of time. They were great at servicing the retail segment. How do I make that decision that, okay, I feel like these reps can still service the designer segment, or do I need to make a change?
It's looking at, so one of the big things you look at is their line package. So beyond just what my brand is what is the typical salesperson that I'm working with, assuming they're a brand ambassador, independent sales representative, what does their line package look like and where's it taking them? If their line package is very skewed towards retail and I'm asking them to go and really do a lot of design work, it won't happen. So you can take a look at that as a starting point, and then really just looking at where they're currently selling and servicing. If they're really entrenched within the retail channel, it's difficult to get them to move entirely for one brand over to selling design or hospitality or whatever it might be. If they have other things within their line package that they're doing that, now it might make more sense to do it that way. So I'd look at line package, I'd look at what they're currently doing within your brand, and then from there try to make the decision as, is my brand strong enough now to and desirable enough to another independent rep to take on that channel exclusively. So usually they have to have good scale within the brand. Again, you have to have a good trade program that's there that they can see that it makes sense for them.
So is it normal for a brand to have two different reps in the same territory, one looking at the designer market, one going after retail, or if I need to go after designer, I either need to have the same rep or maybe change the rep if my rep is not up to that challenge?
I'd say it's more common and it's the same rep, is that it's what's being used. And then it just then again depends upon the individual brand and their line strength and some of those other things. Hospitality is often one that gets split out and done separately. Key account is usually one that's done separately. Again, it's almost same concept, right? If you're really good at dealing with specialty retail stores that are smaller in scale, you may not be great at calling on a top 100 furniture store, and vice versa, frankly. And so oftentimes you see more diversification based upon those channels than the retail versus specialty.
Got it. I think, Randy, if there's so many designers out there, and a lot of these designers are not large businesses with recurring needs, a lot of them, kind of work as freelancers, or their needs vary throughout the year, their business goes up and down. Does it make, in your opinion, does it make more sense to service these accounts internally entirely? Like, you probably don't need to go meet them in person. Maybe like an inside sales model could essentially work better for
on
that.
The design side?
Yeah.
Potentially. I still think, the individual brand ambassadors, again, typically if they're focused on design, they have a line package that's desirable for those designers. And so they're going in and you're getting the benefits of riding the coattails, if you will, of another brand, and being shown. Whereas if you're doing it from an inside sales perspective, then it's almost, you got to pioneer it all on your own, and that could be more challenging.
Got it. Randy, I want to, there are so many brands that we talk to, and there's a common theme, or the common statement I would hear from a lot of them is that my reps are not doing any work. I want to change all my reps. People just say that in passing, but I think that it's never as black and white. The reps are running their own shop, so they're probably putting in the hard work. As somebody who's managed a sales organization and somebody that is working with so many brands, how do you diagnose the problem typically? How would you, what would your advice to other VP of sales or owners will be, if that's the sentiment they have today?
So first and foremost, it's, are the selling tools up to speed and, meeting the needs of what they have in the marketplace? Are we giving them the right information? Do they have the right training? And making sure that all of those things are kind of in place before making a decision about, I'm going to replace, this person or not. And if the answer is yes, hey, we got amazing selling tools, we have amazing training, we're giving them all these various tools and all of that, then again, it's you have to ask that question, well, if I switch this person out, am I going to upgrade or not? Is it that my line isn't right for them because it doesn't fit their line package again? Or they're calling on the wrong type of stores? Going back to what you were asking earlier, if you've hired somebody that is primarily a retail rep and you're asking them to call on designers, well, you kind of did it to yourself, right? You should have known that from the beginning. So there's a little bit of that we have to kind of take a look at first. But I think more and more brands, honestly, are starting to come to the realization that switching out rep A and putting in rep B is not yielding different results, right? Is that there's other underlying issues that need to be addressed, whether it's, how the customers perceive the brand in the marketplace, like we talked earlier. Again, maybe they don't have the right tools. The product line, there's a disconnect with. There's some other issues that are going on that need to be addressed.
And how do you get to the bottom of this? when you work with a brand and you want to figure out what the core issue is, are you just calling upon their customers and asking them a bunch of these questions just to?
Sometimes, sometimes trade shows are a great experience for that. The salespeople are always a good starting point too. They'll start giving you a sense of what's going on. Again, getting into the data side, you can start making kind of decisions, if you will, or a blueprint about what's going on. So, that's kind of the secret sauce, right? Is you kind of are creating this blueprint of, here's my active accounts are in these channels of distribution. They're buying these product categories. These people stopped buying over here. What were they buying? Can we understand, what happened there so we can come up with the right strategy around it?
Randy, the other thing that is changing in the market is, I think trade shows are kind of changing themselves, right? So previously, I think people felt like the ROI of trade shows was easy to calculate in some sense. Like you would put in the dollars and after the trade shows, you'll have the orders to back it up. But that seems to be changing. So talk a little bit about like a lot of these legacy brands that have been very trade show dependent, and trade shows kind of been the center of their modus operandi. What are you seeing? What do they need to change, and how do they need to look at trade shows now versus how they were looking at it before?
So almost always, like if I get involved with a brand, we start talking about creating a multi-pronged strategy around selling or customer engagement. And trade shows is a piece of that. You have your reps, you have your trade shows, your own website. What are you doing on marketplaces? There's a lot of different engagement points to it. And that ultimately what we're trying to do is do that, create year-round customer engagement is what I tell everybody. And you're right. I think trade shows, right, we see it. We're at High Point this week. We'll go over there, and it's going to be busy, and we'll write a lot of business. But you're not going to see nearly as many people as there used to be. And there's a lot of reasons for that, I think, right, is that people are more comfortable buying online. AI is really bringing forth even better assets, so people now can look online and feel more comfortable buying something. They're getting used to buying from their salesperson, perhaps, and we're just seeing less retailers come and designers because they used to come in large groups, basically. Travel costs are up, and so that's keeping some of the assistants and all of that out of the hallways. So you still have a lot of really big buyers here, but they're just not bringing that entourage like they used to. And they're staying for shorter periods of time. Like today is a Friday here at Market, and it used to be that the weekend was slammed and into next week and all of that, and we're going to find that most likely, come Monday, the traffic's already noticeably changed, right? As they're coming earlier in the market, they're staying for less time because they either need to get back to the retail stores or, costs are up, and so they're just not going to stay here as long. So anyways, I think trade shows are still vital to our industry. That's not going to change. But I think what we have to look at is that most people experience our products in this industry, they experience it digitally. A salesperson's walking into their store and they're showing them something on an iPad. They're looking on our website at home. So even if they come into the showroom here and see it live in person, they're going to go back and start shopping the website, and so I think it's really, are you covering all those angles as well? Is your CRM unit, or not unit, your CRM tool up to speed? How's your website? How's your imagery? What other content are you giving them to follow up with after the show? Because most brands, I'll spitball it here a bit, but I would say that 80% of the business, 85% of the business written now is out on the road. It doesn't come during non-show times, if you want to say it that way, as opposed to at shows. So it's really making sure that you've got a comprehensive sales strategy around what happens outside of the shows. And then hand in hand with that is the follow-up. I think that a lot of brands are dropping the ball on follow-up. And then one of the other big changes is the pre-show work. It used to be you could just rely on somebody to walk into your showroom. The hallways would be filled with people, and they would come in, and it was kind of like fishing, right? It's like you were just there, and it was easy. Well, that's not the case anymore. I mean, you've got to be very purposeful about getting confirmed appointments where they're coming to see you and things like that. And so many of the showrooms who are going to have super successful weeks over here this week, they're going to have a ton of appointments where their sales team, their offices did amazing work, getting people on the phone, getting them emails, all of those things. So most of the bigger showrooms, they'll have hundreds and hundreds of appointments that are confirmed with buyers coming in.
Got it. So if Randy, a lot of the orders are coming outside of the market, year-round engagement is kind of vital. How does that change what I do at the trade show? So if lesser buyers are writing orders at trade shows or lesser buyers are coming in, a lot of designers probably will come in but not write orders because that will probably go into the follow-up loop. Does that change a little bit of how I need to think about my trade show and the ROI from it?
Yes. So what I really believe with any brand I work with, I always say we want to be known as the most welcoming showroom in the building. So whether they buy or not, we want them to leave saying, "Wow, that was a great experience. I'm going to go to their website. I'm going to see the salesperson. I'm going to come back again," whatever the case might be. So I think it really is creating a culture of service and creating a really great customer experience here at the market. And again, if your brand's not doing a good job at that, you're going to suffer because there's too many other options out there. They'll leave and not come back because again, they're going to go to your competitor.
Got it. And on the year-round engagement piece, like what do you think are people getting right? What do you think are people not getting right? And what's the right strategy there?
I think social media is just booming on the home side of our business. It's probably on all aspects, honestly. But if you don't have a really robust social media system in place, I think you're going to suffer as a brand. E-marketing, is still kind of the workhorse of what we do in the industry. Although again, it's gotten saturated. So I think it's are you looking at those tools? And probably the other thing I see a lot of brands doing now, which I'm a big proponent of, is they're moving away from I only launch products at market to kind of like a continuous product life cycle where they're starting to release products during non-market cycles because it gives the salesperson some reason to go back in and see them. It gives that buyer a reason to come back to the website, all of those things. So I think we're moving away of like I said, I only release products the week of High Point to it's a lot of that, but then I'm also going to do something in maybe June, and I'm going to do other off-cycle things to give my sales team a reason to go visit their customers.
Randy, you alluded to something earlier, like if you have a lot of dormant customers, there could be issues with your customer service. I think most wholesale companies I speak to, everybody seems to think that their customer service is their USP. Like typically that's the message I get. Can you define for the audience what good customer service means? Like, what are you, when you're saying that, okay, this company has good customer service, what are you tracking or what metrics they should be tracking internally to ensure that their customer service is actually good? Because I think a lot of people feel it's good, but you peel the onion and you ask two questions about like, hey, what's your time to respond to customers? Like people are not really tracking anything.
Right.
So what should they be tracking, really?
Response time is usually one of the first ones I would say to look at. So most phone systems now allow you to see, call activity. So obviously, we can look at dropped calls that go to voicemail, those type of things. And then just establishing, what is the expectation of the brand. Usually most brands, say, customers should be called within 24 hours. Respond to emails the same, return your emails quickly, so kind of set up a culture of service around that, those expectations is that don't make them wait for you. And going back to the trade show thing, that's just as important too, right? Is you're going to see a lot of reps here at market, they're going to work very hard and their follow-up will take weeks after market and they're not going to get the order. But the reps who leave this market and they're already following up and it's like spot on, they're going to get a lot more of the business. But going back to your question on customer service, we usually would want to look at like the return rate as well and what happens within the claims process. So usually that's like the Achilles heel of a lot of brands, right? Is they might be good on the front side, but something goes wrong with the shipment or there's something coming back and it's not buttoned up. takes too long, it's frustrating, it's not clear, and then they lose the customer because they don't feel like they had the right service. So, we those are a few of the low-hanging fruit areas that I would say we would normally want to look at.
Randy, why don't you maybe just put some numbers for us, right? So, what's a good number one? How do you measure this active account base? Like, are you taking a like 90-day average, 6-month average? Like, what are you looking at there? And then, what do you think is the number that everybody should aspire to get to? And like, what are the numbers at which like they're doing something significantly wrong, and it's a
Well, that's
alarming situation.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if I can answer that because it's so varied. But most of the brands, we start looking at a dormant account is over a rolling 12-month period. Something like that is a good one. And again, that's another shift within the market or within people's strategic thinking, because they used to look at, a dormant account with somebody who hadn't bought for 2 years or only on calendar years, right? So if they bought at any point in 2025, then they wouldn't be considered dormant now, even if it's been more than 12 months since they've ordered. So most of the brands, we start them really thinking about you're dormant if you haven't bought in 12 months. And so that kicks in the marketing campaigns, and we try to do that on an automated basis. But we really go back probably 3 to 4 years is what we look at sales history. And we try to go back and really understand what the trend was, why did we lose business, all of those things. And the numbers will be staggering. I mean, it will be millions of dollars of lost sales, tens of millions in some brands' cases, and thousands of customers. And so there's been too much focus on our industry of always getting new and actually not keeping who you actually have. And so it's really both sides, right? Yes, we want new business, but we want to retain the ones that we are working with and expand their market share. Going back to the category thing is, how do we get these brands that are actually, or customers that are working with us already, how do we get them to buy across our product category or catalog? And then you got to get the dormants back in the boat. As I say, you need all three working together. And if we can get them doing that where the active account base is growing, I mean, usually that's going to be a healthy sign that, your business is thriving.
Got it. But just give us some ranges. Like what percentage you would say like, hey, you're doing a great job of keeping your active customer base, and at what percentage are you saying like, hey, this is an alarming situation. Like we really need to do something about this.
So I've done this a long time. I would say nobody in our industry is doing a good job of keeping all of their customers.
Yeah.
It's everybody has the same problem. But I've seen as much as 50% brands losing 50% of their accounts going dormant on them. And those aren't brands specifically that are dealing with designers where you might say, well, it's a project thing, and then those designers or whatever didn't have the right project, and that's why they fell off, right? There's something more going on than that. So usually, honestly, I don't look at it as a percentage, candidly, because the numbers are always so varied, but they're big, right? Is that, if you're a $20 million brand, and I'm like, hey, these customers who bought, 2 years ago represented $4 million of your business and they're gone, just what would happen if we could get half of those back? And then you can start making a strategy around what to do with that. And then again, it's what I referenced earlier. It's like, okay, we've got to do a better job of keeping the people we have, right? So maybe we need to look at their customer journey, right? Is that, what's the experience like? I have a brand I'm working with right now that very good website activity, but a lot of them aren't converting. And so that's something we're taking a look at, as an example, like why not? Is that journey where they go to checkout? There's something happening? What's the disconnect? And can we solve that? So It's really taking a look at that. And even on the front side, of the customer journey, we'll delve into, well, if they register on the website, how is that? What are the documents they're getting? Anything that's customer facing, we want to be looking at to make sure it really is representing the brand in the way that they want to be represented.
Yeah. I think one thing that I'm getting from this conversation, a lot of the things that you want to look at, I think people, like the way people are collecting data, will not allow them to be able to do diagnosis easily. Like if you don't know like if your customer service is just like emails going out, there's no tool in place, there's no sort of metrics in place. I think just diagnosing this problem would be much harder for a brand that doesn't have their tech stack in place, at least the customers facing tech stack, which is the case with a lot of brands.
Yeah.
They have a website, but like the analytics are not correct on the website, or there's no customer service tool in place. Like the phone systems are just regular systems, like they're not recording conversations. And now with AI, like so much of the content that you couldn't do analytics on, like conversations, are now actually things that you could run analysis on. So I think people are losing a lot of that because they don't have systems in place as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Randy, like since you're looking at all of these businesses and you're trying to get to the truth of like what they're missing, are there any other fallacies that you typically find where people have assumptions, but if you look at the data more deeply, like you kind of find the patterns are very different from what they believe?
Yeah, I would say maybe on the product side would be a likely area. Most brands, and rightly so, they'll look at top line dollars, that, hey, this is the largest dollar generator for me, so it is my best seller. Maybe they'll look at units sold or things like that. But the thing that we really encourage people to look at is more momentum, within the SKU or that product itself, right? Is that, is that product that you launched maybe recently, is it starting to gain velocity? And that really is now the products you should be promoting and taking a better inventory position on versus maybe some of the legacy things that you've had in your brand and that they're actually declining, right? It may still be a strong performer, but less customers are becoming engaged in it. So that's usually one of the things that we'll take a look at. The other thing, we're really pushing to consolidate demand behind best sellers, because many brands, their best sellers, the volume isn't really that big, right? Like you go to the showrooms over here, they'll have 1,000 items in their showroom, and after the market's over, half of them didn't sell a single dollar. Right, and even the best item in there was only sold to, 40, 50 customers, something like that. And so how do we get best sellers to be, the demand consolidated across those? So looking at the data helps with that, really understanding, and you mentioned AI before. I know a lot of brands are starting to do that. How do I identify the trend that's happening better using AI as opposed to giving it over to my purchasing department, and they're looking at spreadsheets trying to figure out trends and things like that. And it's hard because, it's happening, but it's happening at such a small grade you're not seeing it until now you're behind. And now you're in an out-of-stock position or something like that.
Interesting. And Randy, the other thing that we were talking about was just sort of keep the accounts that you have. And the second part of it is like grow the accounts, like basically penetrate them more. Like as a sales leader, like what would some of the processes or operational, like how do you operationalize this with your sales team? Are you having regular meetings about this? And what's the right way to, if that is my company's goal, and if one of my goals is to, number one, increase the category sales for other categories that we're probably not selling as much, and like penetrate our existing accounts, how should we operationalize it? What data should we look at, and at what cadence? And how do you sort of rope in the independent rep force into that process?
So it all starts with some of the basic blocking and tackling. So many brands don't actually have a good budgeting process or goal process in place. And so step one is always like, let's establish the goals, and then we communicate it to the sales team on a monthly basis, so they understand exactly what your expectation is and where are they currently at. So step one.
And Randy, just on this goal setting process, how much do you like? How granular should your goals be? Like, should you literally be going at an account level to do this planning? Is it bottoms up? Is it top down? And how much participation are you kind of taking from the rep themselves when you're setting up a goal?
So most brands are going to do goals for specific accounts only at the key account level. And then at the kind of the rank and file, if you will, if you got 1,000 other customers, whatever, you're going to do like kind of a percentage goal increase of what you're trying to expect. So, but I'm a big advocate of not only having an invoice goal, but also have an order-based goal. And so you're kind of using both of those with the sales team. And I really am actually look at the salesperson's previous performance and actually create the goals for them based upon what they previously did, the pattern of how it either ordered or shipped in their territory. But then getting into your question is once they kind of understand, hey, for the year, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Monthly, this is how we think it's going to flow. Then we really get into the order by order details of it. And a couple of things that can really move the needle is looking at the average value per line that they sell, because that's a good indicator of are they selling in depth. An average value per line, what I mean, if that item that they're selling, is it $100, $200, $500, based upon your product line, you would kind of know then how they're doing it. And that'll tell me, if I can just look at things like that, and if I know your product categories, I could say, well, they're not selling furniture because their average value per line is too low, or they're not selling in depth because, again, it's too low. And so you can help them to start understanding that. And then we'll look at like the average number of lines per order. And that's another really easy one of, hey, if you just add one more item to each of your orders, you're going to start selling X amount more. Or if you can just, increase your average order size, and so we try to give them really easy goals to understand, right? Is that, if I say to you, hey, I need you to go out and sell more versus I need you to go out and sell more, and here's how I think you're going to do it, right? We're going to, really focus on these product categories, try to get one more line on each of your orders. We're going to try to get one more order each month, whatever the formula is going to be. It becomes much more attainable and easy for them, honestly, to understand if are they making it or not, right? Then you don't have to be the hammer coming down on anybody because they all know because you gave them the expectations. And then you're meeting with them monthly about it. So I think it's really important, that they understand that. But honestly, going back to the executive leadership needs to understand it too. A lot of executive leaders don't really understand some of the mechanics of that. And once they understand it, then it really starts influencing other things that you're doing. Like if I know that my average line value is $100, I might ask my product development team to say, hey, we really need to try to start increasing the value of some of the new products we're bringing to market, or tell the operational team, let's increase the pack size of these so that they have to buy 4 of them as opposed to 2 because we're trying to move that average line value. So it's, did you ever see that movie Moneyball?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the idea is boil it down to one statistic, and that's the number that, will tell you if you're going to be successful in baseball. And it was, getting on base is basically that. For a lot of brands, it's the average value per line is kind of the holy grail of what you're getting to, because if you can move that number, that's usually going to, drive a lot of your success.
And Randy, you've led several sales teams, big teams. What have you learned in that process? And because the industry is reliant on independent reps. If I'm a rep, I probably have 10, 15 lines. So I think a common concern that most brands have is like when the rep is walking in, are they talking about my brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they bringing my brand up? Do I get, share of that conversation essentially? What are some of the things the brands can do in order to become that priority for that rep? And what should, are there any tools or things or trainings that they need to do to be able to help the rep also perform better for them?
Yeah. I kind of mentioned probably the foundational one earlier, which is, is your brand easy to sell? And for a lot of brands, the answer is no, right? Is that they don't have the right selling tools, their policies are confusing, their training stinks, all of those things. And so it's really, some of that basics, again, making sure that it's easy to sell, you've got the right tools, the communication is clear about what's in stock, what's not in stock, all of those kind of, again, basics that are out there. And then honestly, I'd say it comes down to the culture, right? Does that salesperson enjoy selling your product? Does he enjoy working for that brand and really investing some time and energy to that? I've seen over here, I've worked with brands where salespeople were almost treated like the enemy, right? They would come in the showroom and owners would kind of grumble under their breath and this and that. And then you see the opposite where they come in, they're welcomed, there's a really great culture there. And I think that also, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, if your line is performing, that salesperson's going to sell more of it for you. So, it's incumbent upon the company, the brand, the sales management, whatever it's going to be, to make sure that that salesperson can thrive as much as they can. And the more they sell, the more money they make, and everybody's happy.
Randy, can you break down easy to sell a little bit more? Like when you say like is your brand easy to sell? What are the components or typical problems that you've seen which brands might be ignoring, and that makes it harder for the reps to sell it?
Yeah. So a super easy one is, inventory. Is it in stock? It's not in stock. When's it going to be in stock? And, it's like a mystery for some of the brands in the building over there, right? It's like, I don't know, we're not sure. And if your sales team doesn't have confidence, then they're going to sell less, right? If they have to try to explain to their customers, well, I'm not sure when this is happening, I'm not sure about that, then they'll just kind of, move on. So I think, making sure they have, again, the right information, they're confident in the brand, confident that the product's going to sell. Because the other thing that's interesting too, not to go too far off into the independent rep world, but independent reps are going to be more aligned with the customer than with the brand, right? Because they're going to take care of that customer even more so than the brand, because they know that customer is their lifeline to all the other brands that they have. And so you have to understand that, dynamic to it. And, I use a triangle diagram with a lot of companies and say we kind of want the proverbial win-win-win, where that salesperson is invested in the brand as they are within the customer. And if we can get that across, then again, it's going to be successful and we'll keep that customer forever.
And Randy, you refer to selling tools. So if, when you look at like software that the reps are using, what do you think are some of the non-negotiables today for the rep to be able to do a good job that software needs to support?
So I think they have to have an easy-to-use system for order entry. And most of them are that way, honestly. That gives them, should have inventory information and all of that in there. So I think that's kind of a non-negotiable for them. I think understanding what's going on within their territory is the other big piece, is that they understand open orders, what's going on with shipments, are they getting notifications about some of those kind of, again, more basic things. Because you want to try to move as much of the customer service function, you asked about that earlier, have you equipped your sales team to answer a lot of the questions for customers, or do they always have to go into your customer service team, right? So I think that's, a piece of it.
Got it. Randy, one of the concerns that I've been hearing a lot from sort of different people is younger people are not coming into this profession, like sales profession necessarily, and that causes all sorts of downstream pressure. So do you think the future of sales is just website, like people are just going to buy online? Is that where like 10, 20 years from now we're going to be at, or do you think this is a problem and we do need salespeople and sort of younger generation to come into this space?
Well, I think we definitely need salespeople, number one. Is it a big problem? 100%. I call it the graying of our industry, right? Is that you walk around, again, High Points, that we're here this week. Average age of the sales team is, candidly 50, 60 years old. I mean, it's an older sales team, which brings with it a lot of experience, a lot of relationships and things like that. But what happens, when those people start to retire or what have you? So it's a big issue that I think every brand needs to address, and it's customer reps aren't traveling as much as they used to, and I think they'll say that. They're also a little bit technology adverse, right? So we've been talking a lot about technology. We have this AI component coming and all of that. If you're an older person, I'm older, it's something that you may not be embracing. So I think it's a challenge. But it's interesting. I guess it was in January, I went to another kind of a symposium, if you will, and so there was brands there was agencies, and there were some retailers there. And the retailers talked about how important store-level service was, that they bought more from salespeople or brands that had salespeople come in and see their store, because if you don't understand what's happening in their store, how could you effectively sell to them? And so I don't think salespeople are going away. I think there's definitely going to be modifications coming, and maybe it's going to be more of a hybrid of having, web, inside sales component, outside sales, things like that. But I think it's always going to be a part of our business. But we have to evolve, right? And I think if you have a sales team that's not willing to evolve, either technologically or through the strategies that you're trying to implement, then those end up being people that you end up having to replace.
Got it. Randy, there's a big technological shift sort of underway. Everybody is just hearing about AI all the time. And are there any, with any of the brands that you've worked, have you seen them use AI in a way where it actually drives ROI, like maybe reduces cost or increases margin or sort of increases revenue?
So many brands are starting to use it for commissions. It's something that's kind of, you can put your rules in and have AI really help you with that. And so it can help to lower some of your administrative overhead. So that's an easy one. On the product side, some of the brands are starting to use it to, again, establish trends earlier, which has a huge downstream ripple effect to having the right inventory at the right time, discontinuing products, things like that. I think that's been interesting. On the sales strategy side, I'm working with some brands where, again, you can put in some really basic questions about, sales plan for the state of Ohio. Give me a sales plan in Ohio for these type of stores and cities that have populations more than 50,000 people. And as we've all seen, it'll come back with a whole host of things. And then, kind of dovetailing into what we talked about earlier, we have show traffic. We say, hey, show traffic is maybe diminishing. Why is that? Well, again, I think the content of what we're seeing in whether it's CRM units, websites, whatever, has gotten so much better through imagery, video, all of those things that now buyers feel more comfortable, using those, buying offline, basically, or buying online, I should say. And that's been a big deal. So a lot of the brands I work with are using Wiz Studio, which I know you know very well. But it's worked out, really great. One brand in particular that is using it really struggled with photography. We drove that silhouette image to death, right? And, we'd get detailed shots and all of that. But lifestyle imagery was very difficult, very challenging. And it's really changed, honestly, the brand, where it looks like a different brand now just because we're using more AI imagery. And I'd go back to what I said earlier, too, is like last year, some of the AI imagery that was out there was not, you could tell, right? You would look at it and be like, yeah, that's AI generated. Much harder this year. It's gotten a lot better. The content is better. We're seeing more video out there as well. So, it's part of that evolution, right? If we talk about social media strategy and how that's got to be there, AI imagery is really hitting that hard.
So Randy will move to the most fun section of our podcast. It's a rapid fire round. There's about 10 questions in here.
Okay.
I want you to just give the answer that first comes into your mind, so don't overthink it. And keep your answers kind of short, like one sentence. Right?
Okay.
So first question, what do your best reps do that your average reps don't?
Pay more attention to details.
One thing you would automate with AI tomorrow if you could.
I would say order entry jumps to mind.
The most overspent line item in a wholesale budget.
Most overspent line item in a wholesale budget?
Yeah.
Overspent?
Yeah.
Showroom expense.
What's the one thing about this industry that hasn't changed in 20 years and should?
The sales reps. You can edit that one out.
If AI could give you one perfect report every Monday morning, what's on that report?
I would love to see some of the things, easily gotten to that we spoke about earlier, because right now it's often a lot of data manipulation that you have to do to get to those things that I said were so critical.
What's the most undervalued department in a wholesale company?
The logistics or purchasing team.
Best piece of advice you got early in your career?
The best piece of advice, I would say, have a passion for what you do and to be authentic, which I think has really worked well for me.
What's the first thing you do when you arrive at a trade show?
Get my badge.
What's changed most about how buyers buy in the last 5 years?
On the gift side, fair, which is not really relevant on the home side, but that's been big there. And then again, I'll go back to they're buying more non-show times than they are at shows. That's probably the other big change we're seeing.
And Randy, you've had a very successful career. So if there's somebody who wants to emulate your career, maybe is middle management in sales right now, but wants to sort of lead the sales organization, is there any one piece of advice you'd have for somebody like that?
Yes. So we spent a lot of time talking about data and AI and all this other stuff, but it's the people. If you add value to your clients, whether you're a salesperson selling to them, or your clients are now salespeople that are reporting to your team or whatever, if you're adding value and focusing on that, then you'll have a really successful career.
Got it. And Randy, for all the businesses or all the wholesale sort of leadership that's watching this, for 2026, if you have one advice for them, like one thing that they should not screw up this year or should really focus on, is there something there that you'd like to say?
The inventory management. I think managing your inventory and making sure you're in stock and your best sellers is going to be more important this year than ever before.
Well, thank you, Randy. Thanks for spending time with us
thank
and
you.
Going so deep into several topics. It's been sort of always great working with you, chatting with you, getting to know how you approach several of these problems that people are facing. And I think the audience would get a lot of value from everything that you've shared today.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thanks.